Callie Branson gripped her coffee mug tighter as she watched the beat-up Honda Civic pull into the driveway across the street. The Oregon summer heat made sweat bead on her forehead, but the sight of Vanessa Thorne stepping out of that car made her blood run cold. Well, Callie muttered, pressing herself closer to her kitchen window. Look what the cat dragged back. Vanessa moved with her usual theatrical grace, tossing her blonde hair and adjusting her designer sunglasses. Everything about her screamed fake, from her perfect smile to her too tight jeans. But it was the small figure that climbed out of the passenger seat that made Callie's chest tighten. Nola. Her 7-year-old niece looked smaller than Callie remembered. Thinner. The girl kept her head down, dark hair falling like a curtain around her face. But what struck Callie most was the long-sleeved shirt Nola wore. In 90-degree weather. What the hell? Callie whispered. She set down her mug and stepped onto her front porch. The heat hit her like a wall, making her tank top stick to her skin immediately. Across the street, Vanessa was already barking orders. Nola, grab that box. Careful with it, it's expensive. Vanessa's voice carried that familiar edge, sweet on the surface but sharp underneath. Nola struggled with a box twice her size, her small arms wrapped around it. The long sleeves of her shirt rode up slightly, and Callie caught a glimpse of something dark around the girl's wrist before Nola quickly pulled the fabric down. Hey there, stranger. Callie spun around to find Mrs. Florence Huxley standing at the property line, her gray hair pulled back in its usual tight bun. The 71-year-old retired nurse had lived in the neighborhood longer than anyone and noticed everything. Florence. Callie nodded toward the house across the street. Looks like we've got new neighbors again. That's no neighbor, honey. That's trouble with a capital T. Florence adjusted her thick glasses and squinted at Vanessa. Been watching them unload for 20 minutes. That woman's been snapping at that poor child like a rabid dog. Callie watched Nola disappear into the house, her thin shoulders hunched forward. That's my niece. The one from your brother's side. Florence's voice softened. Poor thing. Lost her daddy not even a year ago. Yeah. Callie's jaw clenched. And now she's stuck with that piece of work for a mother. Florence made a disapproving sound. Something's not right about that woman. Never has been. You mark my words, she's up to no good. Before Callie could respond, Vanessa's laugh echoed across the street. She was talking to Mason, her older brother, who had emerged from the auto shop van parked behind Honda. Mason Thorne looked exactly like what he was, a man who solved problems with his fists. His thick arms were crossed over his chest as he listened to whatever Vanessa was saying. I better go introduce myself, Callie said, though every instinct told her to stay away. Be careful, dear. That family's got more secrets than the government. Callie crossed the street, her worn sneakers silent on the hot asphalt. Vanessa spotted her coming and immediately transformed her face into a mask of grief and exhaustion. Callie. Vanessa rushed toward her, arms outstretched for an unwanted hug. Oh, honey, I'm so glad you're here. This has been so hard on all of us. Callie sidestepped the hug attempt. Vanessa, I know things have been difficult between us, but we're family now. Nola needs her aunt. Vanessa's eyes were dry despite her dramatic tone. This move has been so stressful for her. She's been acting out, being difficult. Where is she? Inside, unpacking her things. Poor baby's been so emotional lately. The grief, you know. Vanessa touched her temple delicately. Some days, she just has these episodes. Screaming, throwing things. The therapist says it's normal for children who've lost a parent. Mason stepped forward, his presence filling the space like a threat. Vanessa's been real patient with the kid, more than most would be. Callie looked between them, her bullshit detector working overtime. I like to see her. Oh, not today. She's having one of her moods. Maybe tomorrow when she's feeling better. Vanessa's smile never wavered, but her eyes had gone cold. You understand? Actually, I don't. Callie. Vanessa's voice dropped, losing some of its fake sweetness. Nola is my daughter. I think I know what's best for her. The front door of the house opened, and Nola appeared in the doorway. She stood perfectly still, watching the adults on the lawn. Even from a distance, Callie could see how pale the girl looked, how carefully she held herself. Hi, sweetheart, Callie called out, raising her hand in a wave that Nola's eyes met hers for just a moment. Then she lifted her own small hand, and Callie saw it again. A dark mark around her wrist, partially hidden by the long sleeve. A mark that looked suspiciously like a bruise. "Nola, get back inside," Vanessa snapped. "I told you to stay in your room." The girl vanished so quickly it was like she'd never been there at all. "See what I mean?" Vanessa sighed dramatically. She's been so defiant lately. I'm at my wit's end. Callie stared at the empty doorway, her heart pounding. She seems scared. She's confused. This is all new for her. Vanessa stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Look, I know we haven't always gotten along, but Nola needs stability right now. She needs her mother. I hope you can respect that." Mason shifted beside his sister, and Callie caught the warning in his posture. "These weren't people you argued with. At least, not directly." "Of course," Callie said finally. "Family's important. I'm so glad you understand." Vanessa's smile returned full force. "We should have you over for dinner soon, once we're all settled in." Callie nodded and backed away, but her eyes stayed on the house. On the window where she thought she saw a small face peeking through the curtains. That evening, Callie sat on her porch swing, a glass of iced tea sweating in her hands. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky orange and pink. It should have been peaceful. Instead, she felt like a wire stretched too tight that a movement in her peripheral vision made her turn. Nola was creeping around the side of Vanessa's house, staying close to the shadows. The girl looked both ways, then darted across the street to Callie's mailbox. Callie stood up slowly, not wanting to startle her. But by the time she reached the end of her driveway, Nola was already running back to the house, her long sleeves fluttering behind her. Inside the mailbox, Callie found a piece of paper, a drawing, done in crayon with a child's careful hand. It showed a girl with dark hair standing inside a black box. The girl in the drawing was crying, her mouth open in what could only be a scream. Above the box, written in shaky letters, were the words, "Help me." Callie's hand shook as she studied the drawing. This wasn't the work of a child acting out. This was a cry for help. She looked back at the house across the street. Most of the windows were dark now, but she could see a light on in what must be an upstairs bedroom. A small silhouette moved past the window. Nola, probably getting ready for bed. "I see you, baby," Callie whispered to the night air. "I see you." 3 days later, Callie found herself at the monthly community yard sale in Crestwood's town square. She wasn't looking for anything in particular, just needed to get out of the house and stop staring at Vanessa's front door. The morning air still held a hint of coolness, but by noon it would be blazing again. Callie wandered between tables of used books, kitchen gadgets, and children's toys, her mind only half on the merchandise. "Looking for anything special?" asked Mrs. Garrett, an elderly woman Callie recognized from the library. "Just browsing," Callie replied, picking up a wooden puzzle from the toy table. "That belonged to my granddaughter. She's outgrown it now, but it's still in perfect condition." Callie turned the puzzle over in her hands. It was one of those wooden frame puzzles with large pieces appropriate for a young child. "How much?" $2. As Callie pulled out her wallet, she noticed something sticking out from between two of the puzzle pieces. Paper. Carefully, she worked it free. It was a torn piece of notebook paper, the kind with wide lines that schools gave to young children. Written in a child's careful handwriting were the words, "She told me, if I cry again, I'll sleep outside with the rats." Callie's blood went cold. She looked back at the puzzle, then at Mrs. Garrett. "Where did you say this came from?" "My granddaughter." "Why? Is something wrong?" No, it's perfect." Callie handed over the money with shaking hands. "Did your granddaughter live here in town?" "Oh yes, just a few blocks over on Pine Street." "Sweet little thing, but her family moved to California last month. Kids grow up so fast these days." Callie nodded absently, her mind racing. Pine Street was nowhere near where Vanessa lived, which meant this piece of paper hadn't come from Mrs. Garrett's granddaughter. She drove home with the puzzle on the passenger seat, that scrap of paper burning a hole in her pocket. Once inside her house, she examined the puzzle more carefully. There were 2 more pieces of paper wedged between the wooden pieces. The second one read, "Mama says bruises are just my skin being weak." The third made Callie sit down hard on her kitchen chair. I drew a picture of the belt, but she found it and made me eat the paper. These weren't random children's scribblings. These were pieces of a diary. And Callie was willing to bet she knew exactly whose diary they came from. She grabbed her phone and dialed the library. Crestwood Public Library, Rowan speaking. Rowan, it's Callie. I need to ask you something, and I need you to keep it between us. Of course. What's going on? You used to work for Child Protective Services, right? Before you came to the library. For 3 years, yeah? What? Callie took a deep breath. If a child was being abused, how would they document it? I mean, if they were trying to keep a record but had to hide it? It was a long pause. Callie, are you okay? Is someone hurt? I can't say yet. I just need to know. Children who are being abused often try to document what happens to them, even if they don't fully understand what they're doing. They might write notes, draw pictures, hide things in places only they know about. Rowan's voice had gone professional, careful. They're trying to make sense of their world, and sometimes they're building evidence without realizing it. What would you do if you found something like that? I'd report it immediately. But Callie, if you're dealing with a situation like this, you need to be careful. Abusers can be dangerous when they feel cornered. After hanging up, Callie spread the 3 pieces of paper on her kitchen table. The handwriting was definitely that of a young child, someone just learning to form letters properly. The paper itself was cheap, the kind that came in composition notebooks from the dollar store. She thought about Nola, about the long sleeves and the bruises around her wrists, about the drawing in her mailbox and the way the girl had practically sprinted away from her mother's voice. The pieces were starting to form a picture, and it was uglier than Callie had imagined. That evening, she positioned herself on her front porch again, this time with a book as cover. She didn't have to wait long. Around 8 o'clock, Vanessa emerged from the house wearing a tight black dress and heels. She climbed in her Honda and drove away, leaving the house dark except for one upstairs window. Callie waited another hour, then crossed the street. The front door was locked, but she knew most of these old houses had back doors that didn't always latch properly. Sure enough, the kitchen door opened with gentle pressure. Nola, she called softly. Honey, it's Aunt Callie. Footsteps creaked overhead, and then Nola appeared at the top of the stairs. She was wearing pajamas with long sleeves, of course, and her dark hair was tangled around her face. Where's your mama, sweetheart? Out, Nola whispered. She said she'd be back late. Can I come up? Nola nodded and turned back down the hallway. Callie followed her into a small bedroom that was sparse and cold. A twin bed with thin blankets, a small dresser, and nothing else. No toys, no books, no decorations. It looked more like a prison cell than a child's room. Nola, I found something at the yard sale today. Callie sat on the edge of the bed and pulled out the 3 pieces of paper. Did you write these? The girl's eyes went wide, and she backed toward the wall. I didn't mean to. I was scared and I wanted to remember, but she said if she found any more she'd. Hey, you're not in trouble. Callie kept her voice gentle. You're not in trouble at all. You were very smart to write these down. She made me throw away my notebook. Said I was telling lies about her. But you tore out some pages first and hid them in the puzzle. Nola nodded, tears starting to fall. I put them there when we were packing. I didn't think anyone would look. Callie's heart broke looking at this small, scared child. Sweetheart, I need you to tell me the truth. Is your mama hurting you? For a moment, Nola just stared at her. Then, slowly, she rolled up the sleeve of her pajama top. Callie had to bite back a gasp. The girl's arm was covered in bruises, some fresh and purple, others fading to yellow. Around her wrist was a clear mark from something being tied too tight. She says it's because I'm bad, Nola whispered. She says if I tell anyone, they'll take me away and put me somewhere worse. Oh, baby. No, you're not bad, and this is not your fault. Callie wanted to gather the girl into her arms, but she could see how carefully Nola held herself. Has anyone else seen these bruises? I always wear sleeves. She makes sure. What about your Uncle Mason? Does he know? Nola's face crumpled. He helped her tie the belt around my wrists when I wouldn't stop crying. He said I needed to learn to be quiet. The rage that filled Callie's chest was so intense, she had to close her eyes and count to 10. When she opened them, Nola was watching her with those huge, solemn eyes. I'm going to help you, Callie said firmly. I'm going to make sure you're safe. She'll hurt me worse if she finds out I told. She's not going to get the chance. But I need you to be brave for just a little while longer, okay? Can you do that? Nola nodded, wiping her nose on her sleeve. I need you to go back to bed now and pretend this conversation never happened. Tomorrow, I'm going to make some phone calls. People are going to come and talk to you, and you need to tell them the truth. All of it. Can you do that? Will you be there? I'll try to be. But even if I'm not, remember that you're telling the truth, and that's always the right thing to do. Callie left the way she came, her hands shaking with anger and determination. She had what she needed now. Documented evidence of abuse in the child's own handwriting and Nola's testimony. It should be enough that IT had to be enough. The next morning, Callie sat in the parking lot of the Oregon Department of Human Services building, staring at the concrete facade and trying to calm her nerves. She called first thing in the morning and been told to come in immediately. The caseworker assigned to her report was a tired-looking woman named Janet Morrison who had the air of someone who'd seen too much and believed too little. You say this child is your niece? Morrison asked, flipping through the pages Callie had brought. My brother's daughter. He died 8 months ago in a car accident. And the mother is Vanessa Thorne. She's not a good person. She never wanted kids, and she's been taking out her frustrations on Nola. Morrison studied the diary pages with a frown. This handwriting is consistent with a 7-year-old's abilities, and the content is certainly concerning. She looked up at Callie. You said you observed bruises on the child? Finger marks around her wrists, bruises up and down her arms, and she's constantly wearing long sleeves, even in this heat. Behavioral signs of abuse. She's withdrawn, speaks in whispers, flinches when adults raise their voices. She drew me a picture asking for help. Callie pulled out Nola's drawing. This isn't normal childhood behavior. Morrison made notes on her computer. We'll need to interview the child and conduct a physical examination. I'll also need to speak with the mother and any other adults in the household. There's an uncle, Mason Thorne. He owns an auto shop downtown. I'll schedule a home visit for this afternoon. In cases like this, we try to move quickly. Callie felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. Thank you. This little girl has been through enough. But when Morrison and a sheriff's deputy arrived at Vanessa's house that afternoon, they found a completely different scene than Callie had described. Callie watched from her window as Vanessa answered the door in a flowing sundress, her hair perfectly styled and her makeup flawless. She looked like a grieving widow who was doing her best to hold things together. Oh my goodness, is everything all right? Vanessa's voice carried across the street, pitched just loud enough for the neighbors to hear. Ma'am, we're here about a report concerning your daughter's welfare. My daughter? Oh no. Is she in trouble at school? I've been so worried about how she's handling her father's death. Callie couldn't hear Morrison's response, but she watched as Vanessa invited them inside, her body language perfectly conveying shocked concern and full cooperation. 20 minutes later, Nola appeared at the front door holding Vanessa's hand. The girl was wearing a cheerful yellow sundress with short sleeves, and from where Callie sat, she looked like any normal 7-year-old. There wasn't a bruise visible anywhere. Callie's heart sank. The interview lasted another 30 minutes. When Morrison and the deputy emerged, they were followed by Vanessa, who was dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. I hope you understand, Vanessa was saying. Nola's been having such a hard time since her father passed. Sometimes she makes up stories because she's angry at the world. Her therapist says it's a normal part of the grieving process. Of course, ma'am. We're sorry to have bothered you. No. I'm grateful that people are looking out for her. It shows what a caring community this is. As the state workers drove away, Vanessa looked directly across the street at Callie's house. Even from a distance, Callie could see the woman smile. It was cold and triumphant. An hour later, Deputy Bryce Conlon knocked on Callie's door. Afternoon, Callie. Mind if I come in? Bryce was a decent man who'd grown up in Crestwood, but he had one significant weakness. He'd been infatuated with Vanessa Thorne since high school. Even though she'd never given him the time of day back then, he still carried a torch for her. What can I do for you, Bryce? Well, I just came from the Thorne place. There's a report filed about possible child abuse. I know. I filed it. Bryce shifted uncomfortably. Callie, I've known Vanessa for years. She might be high maintenance, but she's not an abuser. And that little girl looked healthy and happy to me. Did you see her arms? Her wrist? I saw a normal kid in a sundress playing with her toys. No bruises, no signs of trauma. Bryce's tone was getting defensive. Look, I understand you've been through a lot with your brother's death and all, but making false accusations against a grieving mother. False accusations? Callie's voice rose. Bryce, I have evidence. Written evidence in that child's own handwriting. Kids make up stories, especially kids who are dealing with trauma. Callie stared at him, realizing with growing horror that Vanessa had gotten to him too. Did she tell you I was unstable? That I was looking for attention? Bryce's expression told her everything she needed to know. She's good, Callie said bitterly. I'll give her that. She's very, very good. Callie, you're a nice lady, but you need to let this go. That family's been through enough without false accusations making things worse. After Bryce left, Callie sat in her kitchen and tried to figure out what had gone wrong. Vanessa had been ready for them. She'd covered Nola's bruises, somehow makeup, probably, and coached the girl on what to say. She presented herself as the perfect grieving mother and painted Callie as the unstable sister-in-law who couldn't accept that her brother was gone. That it was masterfully done. But Callie wasn't giving up. If anything, Vanessa's performance had only confirmed what she already knew. The woman was a manipulative narcissist who viewed her daughter as property. And now she knew that Callie was onto her, which meant Nola was in more danger than ever. That night, Callie called the one person she knew she could trust. Rowan, it's me. I need help. What happened with the CPS visit? She was ready for them. Covered the bruises, coached the kid, played the grieving widow card. They bought it completely. Shit, I was afraid of that. Experienced abusers are often very good at manipulating the system. What do I do now? I can't just let this go. You don't, but you need better evidence. More documentation. And you need to be smarter about how you present it. Will you help me? There was a pause. Callie, if we're going to do this, we have to do it right. One mistake, and that little girl could end up in worse danger. I understand. Then yes, I'll help you. But we're going to need more than diary pages and your word against hers. What do we need? Everything. Medical evidence, witness testimony, financial records, anything that shows a pattern of abuse and neglect. We need to build a case so solid that she can't charm her way out of it. How long will that take? I don't know. But Callie, if we're right about this woman, time is the one thing that little girl doesn't have. Florence Huxley had been keeping notes for 43 years. It started as a way to track her patients' symptoms when she worked as a nurse, then evolved into a habit of documenting everything that seemed important. Her neighbors thought she was nosy. They had no idea how methodical she actually was. Tell me again about the screaming, Callie said, sitting at Florence's kitchen table with a cup of coffee growing cold in her hands. Started about a week after they moved in. Florence flipped through a small notebook, her reading glasses perched on the end of her nose. July 15th, 2:30 a.m. High-pitched crying. Lasted approximately 12 minutes. July 17th, 9:45 p.m. Same crying, shorter duration. July 22nd, how many times total? 17 documented instances in the past 3 weeks. Florence looked up from her notes. And that's just what I heard from my bedroom. There could have been more during the day when I was out. Callie rubbed her forehead. Did you ever call the police? Twice. First time, they said it was probably just a child having nightmares. Second time, Deputy Conlon himself came out. Talked to that Thorne woman for about 5 minutes and left. Told me the child was fine and I should mind my own business. What about other neighbors? Has anyone else heard anything? The Martins on the other side are both half-deaf. The college kids in the rental house play their music too loud to hear anything. And the Hendersons. Florence shook her head. They've been having their own problems. Divorce proceedings. Callie made notes in her own notebook. What about the trash? You mentioned something about that. Ah, yes. Florence's eyes lit up. I always put my garbage out Tuesday nights. Can't help but notice what other people throw away. The Thorne house has been interesting. She led Callie to her kitchen window, which had a clear view of the Thorne driveway and garbage bins. I've seen torn clothing in there. Child-sized. Some of it with what looked like blood stains. Also empty wine bottles, expensive ones. Usually 3 or 4 a week. You've been watching their garbage. I've been watching everything, dear. That woman drives off most afternoons, leaves the child alone. Sometimes she's gone for hours. Yesterday, she didn't come back until after midnight, stumbling drunk up the front steps. Callie felt her anger building again. And no one's reported this. Who would believe an old woman's notes against a grieving mother's word? Florence closed her notebook with a snap. But you believe me, don't you? Every word. Then what are we going to do about it? Before Callie could answer, her phone buzzed with a text from Rowan. Can you meet me at the library? Found something important. 30 minutes later, Callie found Rowan in the library's back office, surrounded by printouts and legal documents. I've been making some calls, Rowan said without preamble. Remember I told you I still have contacts in the child welfare system? Yeah. One of them works for a nonprofit that provides medical exams for suspected abuse cases. She's willing to see Nola, but it has to look legitimate. We can't just walk in and request an examination. How do we do that? The library's summer art program. We're running a workshop next week on therapeutic art for children who've experienced trauma. Perfectly legitimate, and we can specifically invite families that might benefit from the program. Callie was starting to see where this was going. And part of the program includes a wellness check. Dr. Sarah Chun volunteers for these workshops. She's a pediatrician who specializes in trauma cases. If she happens to notice injuries during the art activities, Rowan shrugged. Well, she's a mandated reporter. Will Vanessa agree to let Nola participate? That's where it gets interesting. I looked up the original invitation list for the program. Vanessa already signed Nola up 3 weeks ago. Callie blinked. She what? Apparently, she's been telling people how concerned she is about Nola's emotional state. How she's looking for any program that might help her daughter process her grief. She's been playing the devoted mother role to anyone who'll listen. So she'll expect to be invited. Exactly. And since it's a group setting with other parents and children, she won't want to back out without looking suspicious. The workshop was scheduled for the following Thursday. Callie spent the intervening days doing surveillance on the Thorne house, documenting everything she could observe. Florence shared her notes going back 3 weeks, creating a timeline of disturbances and suspicious activity. On Wednesday night, Callie watched Vanessa leave the house in her Honda, dressed for a night out. This time, Callie was ready. She waited until Vanessa's car disappeared around the corner, then crossed the street and knocked softly on the back door. Nola? It's Aunt Callie. The door opened almost immediately. Nola stood there in her inevitable long sleeves, looking thinner than ever. Mama's not here, she whispered. I know, sweetheart. I wanted to talk to you about something. There's going to be an art class at the library tomorrow. Your mama already signed you up for it. Nola's eyes widened slightly. Am I in trouble? No, baby. No, you're not in trouble. But there's going to be a doctor there. A nice lady doctor who helps kids feel better. She might ask to look at your arms. Mama says never let anyone see. I know that's what she says. But sometimes mamas are wrong. Callie knelt down to Nola's eye level. If the doctor asks to see your arms, I want you to show her. Can you do that? Will you be there? I'll be there. And so will my friend Rowan. We won't let anything bad happen to you. Nola nodded slowly. Okay. Thursday afternoon arrived with the usual oppressive heat. The library's main room had been transformed into an art studio, with tables covered in paper, crayons, paints, and other supplies. Dr. Chun was a small, gentle woman who moved through the space with quiet confidence. Vanessa arrived precisely on time, wearing a flowing white dress that made her look like an angel. She had Nola by the hand, and the girl was wearing a long-sleeved white blouse despite the temperature. This is so wonderful, Vanessa gushed to Rowan. Nola's been looking forward to this all week. Haven't you, sweetheart? Nola nodded silently, her eyes already scanning the room for Callie. Why don't you find a seat at one of the tables? Rowan suggested. We'll be starting in just a few minutes. As the workshop began, Dr. Chun moved between the tables, chatting with the children about their artwork and observing their behavior. Callie positioned herself where she could watch both Nola and Vanessa. Today we're going to draw pictures about feelings, Dr. Chun announced. Sometimes when we've been sad or scared, it helps to put those feelings on paper. Nola picked up a black crayon and began drawing. Callie couldn't see what she was creating, but she could see the intensity in the girl's movements. After about 20 minutes, Dr. Chun made her way to Nola's table. "That's a very interesting picture, Nola. Can you tell me about it?" Nola glanced nervously at her mother, then whispered something to Dr. Chun. The doctor nodded and said something back, too quietly for anyone else to hear. "It's getting quite warm in here," Dr. Chun said in a louder voice. "Would anyone like to roll up their sleeves to be more comfortable?" Several children immediately pushed up their sleeves. Nola hesitated, looking again at Vanessa, who was chatting with another mother and not paying attention. Slowly, carefully, Nola rolled up the sleeves of her white blouse. Even from across the room, Callie could see Dr. Chen's reaction. The doctor's professional composure never wavered, but her eyes hardened as she took in the marks on Nola's arms. "Nola, I'd like to talk to you privately for just a moment. Would that be okay?" Dr. Chen's voice was gentle but firm. Before Nola could answer, Vanessa materialized at the table. "Is everything all right?" "Everything's fine," Dr. Chun said smoothly. "I was just admiring Nola's artwork. She's very talented. She gets that from her father." Vanessa's smile was brittle. "He was always artistic. Actually, I was wondering if I could speak with you both privately. Just a quick consultation about some resources that might help Nola with her grief processing." Vanessa's eyes narrowed slightly, but she couldn't refuse without seeming uncooperative. Of course. They moved to a small conference room off the main area. Through the glass door, Callie could see Dr. Chun talking earnestly with both Vanessa and Nola. Vanessa's body language grew increasingly tense as the conversation continued. After 10 minutes, they emerged. Vanessa's face was flushed, and she had a death grip on Nola's hand. "We need to go," Vanessa announced loudly. "Nola's not feeling well." "But we haven't finished the workshop," Rowan protested. "She's had enough art therapy for one day." Vanessa was already dragging Nola toward the exit. "Come on, sweetheart. Let's get you home." As soon as they left, Dr. Chun approached Callie and Rowan. "We need to talk," she said quietly. Right now, in the privacy of Rowan's office, Dr. Chun spread out photos she'd taken with her phone during the consultation. "These are consistent with physical abuse," she said without preamble. "Multiple bruises in various stages of healing. Ligature marks around both wrists. What appears to be a belt mark across her upper arm. This child is being systematically abused. Will you report it?" Callie asked. "I already have. But given what happened with the first report, I wanted to give you a heads up. This woman is going to claim that the injuries are from normal childhood activities, or that the child injures herself during grief episodes. Will they believe her again? Not with these photos and my medical opinion. But she's going to fight this, and she's going to fight dirty." Dr. Chun was right. By the time Callie got home that evening, Deputy Conlon was waiting on her front porch. "We need to talk, Callie. Let me guess. Vanessa called you. She's filed a harassment complaint against you. Says you've been stalking her and her daughter, trying to turn the child against her mother. And you believe her?" Bryce looked uncomfortable. "I believe that you've been through a lot. And sometimes grief makes people do things they wouldn't normally do. Bryce, that woman is abusing her daughter. A doctor just filed a report confirming it. A doctor who you arranged to have examine the child under false pretenses. That's going to hurt your credibility when this goes to court." The words hit Callie like a slap. "When this goes to court, Vanessa's getting a lawyer. She's talking about suing you for defamation and harassment. She's also looking into getting a restraining order. She can't do that. She can, and she will if you don't back off. Callie, I'm telling you this as a friend. You need to let this go before it destroys your life." After Bryce left, Callie sat on her porch and stared at the house across the street. Every window was dark except for one upstairs room where a small figure occasionally passed by the window. Her phone rang. "Rowan, how bad is it?" Rowan asked. "Bad. She's getting lawyers involved. Talking about restraining orders. Then we need to move faster. I've been doing some digging into Vanessa's background, and I found something interesting." "What?" "Your brother's will. The original one. Not the one that gave Vanessa custody of Nola." Callie's breath caught. "What do you mean?" "Meet me tomorrow morning. Early. and bring whatever legal documents you have from your brother's estate. Rowan, what did you find? Proof that Vanessa Thorne is a liar, and possibly a criminal. The Crestwood County Courthouse opened its public records office at 8 a.m. sharp. Rowan was waiting in the parking lot when Callie arrived, a manila folder tucked under their arm and a grim expression on their face. "I've been here since 7, Rowan said. "Wanted to make sure we were first in line. What exactly are we looking for?" "The real will. The one your brother actually filed." They made their way through the courthouse's marble corridors to the clerk's office. Rowan had clearly done this before they knew exactly which forms to fill out and which fees to pay. "I need to see all documents related to the estate of David Branson," Rowan told the clerk. Date of death was November 15th of last year. The clerk, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes, disappeared into the back room. She returned 20 minutes later with a thick file. "You can review these at the table over there. No phones, no copies without paying the fee." Rowan spread the documents across the small table, organizing them chronologically. "Here's what I found yesterday," they said, pointing to a document dated 3 months before David's death. "This is a will that your brother filed in August. Look at the custody provisions." Callie leaned in to read the legal language. It was dense and confusing, but one section was clear enough. "In the event of my death, I hereby name my sister, Callie Marie Branson, as legal guardian of my minor daughter, Nola David Branson." "He gave me custody," Callie whispered. "Full custody, legal and physical." Vanessa was specifically excluded from guardianship due to what David called concerns about her stability and parenting abilities. But the will that was probated is this one. Rowan pulled out another document, dated just 2 weeks after David's death, filed by Vanessa's attorney. It gives her full custody and only mentions you as a potential guardian if circumstances make it impossible for the mother to care for the child. Callie stared at the 2 documents. "She forged a new will. That's what it looks like. But we need to prove it. I've already contacted a friend of mine who's a lawyer. She's willing to take this case pro bono if we can show evidence of fraud." "What kind of evidence?" "Bank records, for starters. If Vanessa paid someone to forge documents or bribe officials, there might be a paper trail. Also, the original will should have witnesses' signatures. We can track them down and verify what they actually signed." They spent the rest of the morning photographing documents and taking notes. By noon, they had enough evidence to convince Rowan's lawyer friend to take a closer look. Attorney Lisa Kim was a small woman with sharp eyes and an expensive suit. Her office was in a converted Victorian house near downtown Crestwood, and her walls were covered with certificates and awards. "This is definitely fraudulent," Kim said after reviewing the documents. "The signatures don't match, the notary seal is wrong, and the filing date is suspicious. But proving it in court is going to require more than just document analysis." "What do we need?" Callie asked. The notary who allegedly witnessed this was named Robert Martinez. He works or worked at Mason Thorne's auto shop. "That's not a coincidence." Rowan leaned forward. "You think Mason was involved in the forgery?" "I think Mason's been helping his sister commit fraud. And if we can prove that, we can unravel the whole thing." Kim made notes on a legal pad. "I'm going to file a motion to have both wills examined by a handwriting expert. I'm also going to subpoena bank records for both Vanessa and Mason to look for suspicious payments." "How long will that take?" "Weeks, maybe months. But there's something else we can do right now." Kim pulled out her phone. "I'm going to call the State Police Financial Crimes Unit. Well, forgery is a felony, and if they open an investigation, it will add weight to our custody case." While Kim made her calls, Callie stepped outside to get some air. The afternoon heat was oppressive, but it felt good to be taking action instead of just watching and waiting. Her phone buzzed with a text from Florence. "You need to see this. Come home now." Callie found Florence standing in her backyard with a pair of binoculars and a camera with a telephoto lens. "I've been watching the Thorne house since you left this morning," Florence said without preamble. "Vanessa came home around noon with Mason and another man I didn't recognize. They've been in there for 2 hours. So look." Florence handed her the binoculars and pointed toward Vanessa's upstairs window. Through the lenses, Callie could see into what appeared to be Nola's bedroom. The girl was sitting on her bed, but something was wrong. Her arms were pulled behind her, and there was something around her mouth. Jesus Christ. Is she tied up? That's what it looks like to me. And that's not all. Florence showed Callie the camera display. I've been taking pictures for the past hour. The photos clearly showed Nola restrained on the bed while adult figures moved around the room. In one shot, Mason was visible holding what looked like rope. We have to call the police, Callie said. I already tried. Called the non-emergency line, and they said they'd send someone when they could. That was an hour ago. Callie was already dialing 911. This is an emergency. I'm reporting child abuse in progress. The dispatcher was more responsive to an emergency call. A patrol car arrived within 10 minutes, but it wasn't Deputy Conlon. It was Officer Patricia Williams, a young woman who joined the force recently. Ma'am, you reported child abuse. The little girl across the street. She's tied up in her bedroom right now. We have photographs. Officer Williams looked at Florence's pictures on the camera display. Her expression grew grave. I need to check this out immediately. They watched from Florence's front yard as Officer Williams knocked on Vanessa's door. It took several minutes for anyone to answer, and when Vanessa finally appeared, she looked flustered and out of breath. Callie couldn't hear the conversation, but she could see Vanessa's animated gestures and Officer Williams' increasingly stern posture. After a few minutes, the officer followed Vanessa into the house. 15 minutes later, they emerged with Mason and the unidentified man. All three adults looked angry and defensive, but there was no sign of Nola. Officer Williams crossed the street to where Callie and Florence waited. Where's the child? Callie asked immediately. Safe. She was in her room, but she wasn't restrained. She was playing with some rope toys. Rope toys? Florence sputtered. Officer, I know what I saw. Ma'am, I understand your concern, but children play games that can look suspicious to adults. The little girl seemed fine, and there was no evidence of abuse. Did you see her arms? Her wrists? She was wearing long sleeves, which her mother explained is because she has a skin condition that makes her sensitive to sunlight. Callie felt like screaming. Officer Williams, that woman is lying. The child is being abused, and she's covering it up. Ma'am, I've documented your complaint, but I didn't observe any evidence of abuse or neglect. The child appeared healthy and was not in immediate danger. After the officer left, Callie and Florence stood in defeated silence. Vanessa had done it again, explained away the evidence, and made them look like hysterical busybodies. But something had changed. When Mason and the unidentified man left Vanessa's house an hour later, Mason was carrying a cardboard box, and the look he gave Callie's house was pure menace. They're destroying evidence, Florence said quietly. Whatever they were doing in there, they're covering their tracks. That evening, Rowan called with news from Lisa Kim. The handwriting analysis confirmed what we suspected, Rowan said. The signature on the second will is definitely forged, and the bank records show some interesting patterns. What kind of patterns? Cash withdrawals from Vanessa's account in the days before the forged will was filed. Large ones. Also, Mason deposited an unusual amount of cash around the same time. So they paid someone to forge the will and destroy the original. That's what it looks like. But there's more. Lisa found something else in the bank records. What? Vanessa's been using Nola's social security number to open credit accounts. She's got 3 credit cards and a personal loan in the child's name. We're talking about identity theft on top of everything else. Callie felt a grim satisfaction. That's a federal crime. Exactly. And it's much harder to explain away than child abuse allegations. Financial crimes leave paper trails that don't lie. What's our next move? Lisa's filing for an emergency custody hearing based on the will fraud. She's also reporting the identity theft to the FBI. But Callie, we need to be careful. If Vanessa realizes how much evidence we have, she might do something desperate. Like what? Like disappear with Nola. Or worse. As if summoned by their conversation, Callie's phone rang. The caller ID showed Vanessa's number. Hello, Callie. Vanessa's voice was calm, but there was an edge underneath. I think it's time we had a conversation. About what? About your harassment of my family. About your delusions regarding my daughter. About the lies you've been spreading around town. I haven't told any lies. Haven't you? I think you have. I think you've been so consumed with grief over your brother's death that you've invented this fantasy where I'm some kind of monster and you're the rescuing hero. Vanessa, I know what you're doing to Nola. You don't know anything, but you're about to learn something important. Vanessa's voice dropped to a whisper. Stop interfering in my life, or you'll regret it. I promise you that. The line went dead. Callie stared at her phone, her hands shaking. That hadn't been the voice of a grieving mother or even an angry parent. That had been the voice of someone who would do anything to protect their secrets. And Nola was alone in the house with her. She threatened you, Florence said flatly. That woman actually threatened you. It was the next morning, and Callie was sitting in Florence's kitchen, explaining the previous night's phone call, while Florence made coffee with hands that shook slightly from either age or anger. I've been thinking about this all night, Callie continued. She knows we're on to her. She knows about the will investigation and probably suspects we've found evidence of the identity theft, which means she's dangerous. Florence set down a mug in front of Callie. Cornered animals bite. Callie's phone buzzed with a text from Rowan. Lisa wants to meet. So she has a plan. An hour later, they were back in Lisa Kim's office. The lawyer looked like she hadn't slept much either. The FBI is very interested in the identity theft case, Lisa began without preamble. They're opening an investigation, but these things take time. Meanwhile, that little girl is still in danger. What are our options? Callie asked. Legally? We wait for the custody hearing, which is scheduled for next week. Practically, Lisa leaned back in her chair. We need Vanessa to incriminate herself. On record. How do we do that? We get her talking. People like Vanessa, narcissists with control issues, can't resist explaining how clever they are when they think they've won. If we can get her to admit to the abuse, the fraud, anything that proves our case. You want me to wear a wire, Callie said. Not exactly. Oregon is a one-party consent state, which means you can legally record a conversation as long as one person in the conversation, you, consents to the recording. But it has to be done carefully. Rowan shifted in their chair. What are you thinking? Vanessa called Callie last night to threaten her. What if Callie called her back? Pretended to be intimidated, said she was backing off? Vanessa might let her guard down, maybe even gloat about how she's outmaneuvered everyone. That's incredibly risky, Rowan protested. If Vanessa suspects anything, the risk is worth it if we can get a confession, Lisa said. But it has to be natural. If she sounds like she's fishing for information, Vanessa will clam up immediately. Callie thought about Nola, alone in that house with a woman who grew more desperate by the day. What exactly would I need to get her to say? Anything that proves she's been lying. Admissions about the abuse, about forging the will, about the identity theft. Even if she just confirms that she's been covering things up, it would help our case. And you think she'll talk to me? I think her ego won't let her resist rubbing your nose in her victory. Narcissists need to feel superior, and right now she thinks she's beaten you at every turn. They spent the next hour planning the conversation. Lisa provided a digital recorder app for Callie's phone that would save the recording to a secure server. Florence volunteered to be a witness. She would position herself where she could see Vanessa's house during the call, in case anything went wrong. Remember, Lisa said as they prepared to leave, you're not trying to entrap her. You're just giving her the opportunity to tell you the truth. Let her do the talking. That afternoon, Callie sat on her front porch with her phone in her hand, staring at Vanessa's number. Florence was visible in her garden next door, pruning roses but keeping one eye on the Thorne house. Callie took a deep breath and dialed. Well, Vanessa, answer on the second ring. Calling to apologize? I'm calling to tell you that you win, Callie said, putting as much defeat into her voice as she could manage. I'm done. Are you really? Because you've been quite persistent. The police don't believe me. CPS doesn't believe me. My own friends think I'm having some kind of grief-induced breakdown. I can't keep fighting the whole world. There was a pause. That must be very difficult for you. You've been right all along. I was so angry about losing David that I needed someone to blame. I convinced myself that you were hurting Nola, but what? But she seems happy when I see her. Healthy. Maybe I was just seeing what I wanted to see. Grief can play tricks on the mind, Vanessa said, and Callie could hear the satisfaction in her voice. It's understandable. I owe you an apology. I've caused a lot of trouble for you and Nola, and I'm sorry. Apology accepted. Vanessa's voice was warming up, becoming more confident. I know this has been hard on everyone. Can I ask you something? How did you manage to keep it together through all of this? I mean, dealing with your grief and Nola's behavioral problems, and then having me making accusations. It hasn't been easy, but Nola needed me to be strong. Those behavioral problems she's been having, the therapist you mentioned said they were normal. Oh, that. Vanessa laughed, and it was a sound without humor. There is no therapist. I just said that to make people think I was getting help for her. Callie's grip tightened on the phone. No therapist? Please. I'm not paying some overeducated quack to tell me how to raise my own daughter. Nola acts out because she's spoiled, not because she's traumatized. A little discipline goes a long way. Discipline? Nothing that wasn't done to me when I was her age. My mother believed in consequences for bad behavior. So do I. What kind of consequences? Oh, timeouts, loss of privileges. Sometimes she needs a firmer hand to get the message through. Callie could feel her heart pounding. Firmer hand. Look, Callie, I know you disapprove of physical discipline, but sometimes it's necessary. Nola's father spoiled her rotten before he died. Someone has to teach her boundaries. I didn't realize, of course you didn't. You see her for 5 minutes and think you know everything about raising children. But you've never had kids, have you? You don't understand what it takes. You're right. I don't understand a lot of things. Like how you managed the legal stuff after David died. All those documents and court filings, it must have been overwhelming. It was, especially since David's original will was so unrealistic. Unrealistic? He wanted to give you custody of Nola. Can you imagine? A single woman with no parenting experience, raising a traumatized child? It would have been a disaster. So you had to change it. I had to fix it. Make it more reasonable. Nola belongs with her mother, not with some aunt who barely knows her. How did you fix it? There was a pause, and Callie worried she'd pushed too far. But then Vanessa's voice came back, full of pride. Mason knows a guy who does document work. It wasn't cheap, but it was worth it to keep my daughter where she belongs. Document work, new will, updated paperwork, proper notarization. All perfectly legal once it was filed correctly. Callie's hands were shaking now, but she kept her voice steady. That must have been expensive. Worth every penny. And it's not like I couldn't afford it. I had access to plenty of money. From David's insurance, among other things. Vanessa's voice had taken on a boastful tone. There are lots of ways to access funds when you need them. Credit applications, for instance. Amazing how easy it is to get money when you have the right information. Right information, social security numbers, birth certificates, that sort of thing. Nola's credit is excellent, by the way. Has been since she was 5. Callie closed her eyes. There was admission to identity theft in her daughter's name. That's very clever of you. I've had to be clever. Nobody's going to take care of us, but us. And I'll do whatever it takes to protect my family. Whatever it takes. Whatever it takes. Vanessa's voice had gone cold again. People who interfere with my family tend to regret it. That's something you should keep in mind. Is that another threat? It's a promise. Stay away from my daughter, Callie. This is your only warning. The line went dead. Callie sat on her porch for a long moment, staring at her phone. She had it. Admissions to forging the will, identity theft, physical abuse, and another threat. All recorded and saved. Florence appeared at her side. Did you get what you needed? More than I hoped for. Callie stood up, her legs unsteady. She practically confessed to everything. What now? Now we spring the trap. But as they spoke, Callie noticed movement in Vanessa's upstairs window. A small face appeared, briefly Nola, looking directly at them. Even from across the street, Callie could see the fear in the girl's eyes. Time was running out. The Crestwood County Family Court was a modern building that tried too hard to look welcoming. Soft colors, curved edges, motivational posters about children's welfare. It fooled no one. This was still a place where families were torn apart and rebuilt according to legal formulas that had nothing to do with love. Callie sat at the plaintiff's table next to Lisa Kim, watching as Vanessa entered with her attorney. Vanessa had chosen her outfit carefully, a conservative navy dress, minimal makeup, hair pulled back in a simple style. She looked like a devoted mother who'd been wrongfully accused. Her lawyer, a silver-haired man named Richard Steinberg, had a reputation for defending difficult clients. He was expensive, which raised questions about how Vanessa was paying his fees. "Remember," Lisa whispered to Callie, "let me do the talking unless the judge asks you a direct question. We've got strong evidence, but Steinberg is going to try to make this about your mental state and your grief over losing your brother." Judge Patricia Hernandez took the bench at exactly 10 a.m. She was a stern-looking woman in her 50s who'd been handling family court cases for over 20 years. Her reputation was for being thorough and unsentimental about her decisions. "This is a petition for emergency custody modification in the matter of Nola David Branson," Judge Hernandez began. "Ms. Kim, you're representing the petitioner?" "Yes, Your Honor. My client, Callie Branson, is seeking immediate custody of her 7-year-old niece based on evidence of abuse, neglect, and fraud. Those are serious allegations. Mr. Steinberg, how does your client respond?" "Your Honor, this is a vendetta by a grieving woman who cannot accept that her brother chose his wife to raise their daughter. Ms. Vanessa Thorne is a devoted mother who has been subjected to harassment and false accusations by someone who has no experience with children and no legal standing in this matter." "We'll see about the legal standing," Judge Hernandez said dryly. "Ms. Kim, present your evidence." Lisa stood and approached the bench with a thick folder. "Your Honor, I'd like to present several pieces of evidence that establish a pattern of abuse and fraud." "Proceed." "First, medical evidence. Dr. Sarah Chun, a licensed pediatrician, examined the minor child during a library workshop. She photographed injuries consistent with physical abuse." Lisa handed over the photos. "Multiple bruises in various stages of healing, ligature marks indicating restraint, and evidence of repeated trauma." Judge Hernandez studied the photographs, her expression growing grim. "Mr. Steinberg, Your Honor, these photographs were taken without the mother's knowledge or consent during what Ms. Thorne believed was an innocent art therapy session. The examination was conducted under false pretenses, and the injuries shown can be explained by normal childhood activities and the child's documented behavioral issues following her father's death." "What behavioral issues?" the judge asked. "Self-harm, Your Honor. The child has been engaging in self-injurious behavior as a way of processing her grief. She bangs her arms against walls, ties things around her wrists, and has even been found hitting herself with objects. Ms. Thorne has been working with the child to address these behaviors." Callie felt sick listening to Steinberg's explanation. Vanessa had an answer for everything, even if it meant portraying her daughter as mentally unstable. "Ms. Kim, what other evidence do you have?" "Documentary evidence of fraud, Your Honor." Lisa presented the 2 wills. "The deceased father filed a will 3 months before his death naming my client as guardian. The will that was probated after his death is a forgery, created to give custody to Ms. Thorne." Judge Hernandez examined both documents. "These signatures do appear different. Have you had them analyzed?" "Yes, Your Honor." A certified handwriting expert confirmed that the second will contains forged signatures. "We also have evidence that Ms. Thorne paid to have the forged documents created and the original will destroyed." "That's a serious accusation." "What evidence?" "Bank records showing cash withdrawals by Ms. Thorne and corresponding deposits by her brother, Mason Thorne, who arranged for the forgery. Also, a recorded phone conversation in which Ms. Thorne admits to having the will fixed through document work performed by an associate of her brother's." Steinberg shot to his feet. "Objection, Your Honor. That recording was obtained without my client's knowledge and may have been taken out of context. Oregon is a one-party consent state, Mr. Steinberg. The recording is admissible." "Ms. Kim, I'd like to hear this recording." Lisa activated the digital player. Vanessa's voice filled the courtroom. "Mason knows a guy who does document work. It wasn't cheap, but it was worth it to keep my daughter where she belongs. New will, updated paperwork, proper notarization. All perfectly legal once it was filed correctly." The judge's expression darkened. "Is there more?" "Yes, Your Honor. Evidence of identity theft. Ms. Thorne has been using her daughter's personal information to open credit accounts and obtain loans. The child, who is 7 years old, currently has 3 credit cards and a personal loan in her name, all opened by her mother. Jesus Christ, Judge Hernandez muttered, then caught herself. Excuse me, Mr. Steinberg, how do you explain this? Your Honor, my client was acting in her daughter's best interests, building credit history that would benefit the child in the future. Many parents open accounts in their children's names for educational purposes. With 7-year-olds? I think not. The judge made notes on her legal pad. What else, Ms. Kim? Witness testimony, Your Honor. Florence Huxley, a retired nurse who lives next door to Ms. Thorne, has documented numerous instances of disturbances at the residence, including children's screams at all hours and evidence of the child being left alone for extended periods. Florence took the stand with her notebook clutched in her arthritic hands. She read from her meticulously kept records, dates, times, duration of incidents, weather conditions, and her observations about the household. On July 22nd at 11:47 p.m., I heard high-pitched screaming from the Thorne residence that lasted approximately 15 minutes. The next morning, I observed Ms. Thorne putting torn children's clothing into the garbage bin, including what appeared to be a shirt with bloodstains. Mrs. Huxley, Steinberg said during cross-examination, isn't it true that you've had disputes with several neighbors over the years about noise complaints and property boundaries? I document what I observe. Nothing more, nothing less. And isn't it true that you've been diagnosed with moderate hearing loss? I hear well enough to know when a child is in distress. Next, Lisa called Dr. Chun to the stand. The pediatrician testified about Nola's injuries with clinical precision, describing each bruise and mark with medical terminology that made them sound even more horrific. In my professional opinion, these injuries are consistent with systematic physical abuse over an extended period. The pattern suggests escalating violence and increasingly sophisticated methods of restraint. Dr. Chun, Steinberg asked, have you ever seen children injure themselves during episodes of grief or emotional distress? Yes, but those injuries have a different pattern. Self-inflicted injuries are typically on accessible areas like arms and legs, and are usually repetitive in the same location. These injuries show variety in location and method that's consistent with abuse by another person. Finally, Lisa played the full recorded conversation between Callie and Vanessa. The courtroom was silent as Vanessa's voice admitted to forging documents, using her daughter's identity for financial gain, and using firmer hand discipline. She acts out because she's spoiled, not because she's traumatized. A little discipline goes a long way. Sometimes she needs a firmer hand to get the message through. When the recording ended, Judge Hernandez looked directly at Vanessa. Ms. Thorne, you'll have the opportunity to respond to these allegations. But first, I'd like to speak with the child. Your Honor, Steinberg interjected, the child has been through significant trauma. Subjecting her to court proceedings could be further traumatizing. Mr. Steinberg, this child is the subject of these proceedings. I'm not making a custody decision without hearing from her. Nola was brought into the courtroom by a court advocate. She looked impossibly small in the witness chair, wearing a long-sleeved dress despite the summer heat. Her dark hair was neatly combed, but her eyes were huge and frightened. Judge Hernandez softened her voice. Hi, Nola. I'm Judge Hernandez. Do you know why you're here today? Nola shook her head. Some grown-ups are trying to figure out what's best for you. I'd like to ask you a few questions, okay? There are no wrong answers, and you won't get in trouble no matter what you say. Okay, Nola whispered. Can you tell me about your home with your mama? Nola glanced nervously at Vanessa, then back at the judge. It's okay. Do you feel safe at home? Another glance at Vanessa. Yes. Nola, I notice you're wearing long sleeves. Are you cold? No. Mama says I have to wear sleeves so people don't see my marks. What kind of marks? The ones from when I'm bad. Judge Hernandez leaned forward. Can you show me these marks? Nola looked terrified. She started to roll up her sleeve, then stopped and looked at Vanessa again. It's okay, sweetheart, the judge said gently. You can show me. With shaking hands, Nola rolled up both sleeves. The courtroom gasped. Her thin arms were covered in bruises, some fresh and purple, others fading to yellow and green. Around each wrist was a clear ligature mark. How did you get these marks, Nola? when I cry or don't listen or ask questions. Mama says I have to learn to be quiet. Who gives you these marks? Mama. And Uncle Mason when he comes over. What do they use to give you these marks? Belts mostly. Sometimes rope when I won't stop crying. They tie my hands so I can't cover my ears. The courtroom was dead silent. Even Steinberg looked shaken. Nola, Judge Hernandez continued, where would you like to live? For the first time, Nola looked directly at Callie. With Aunt Callie. She's nice to me. Thank you, sweetheart. You can go with Miss Peterson now. The court advocate led Nola out of the courtroom. Judge Hernandez turned to Vanessa. Ms. Thorne, do you wish to testify in your own defense? Vanessa stood up, and for the first time, her composure cracked. Your Honor, I love my daughter. Everything I've done has been for her own good. She's a difficult child who requires structure and discipline. My methods may seem harsh, but they're necessary. Ms. Thorne, you've just admitted to physically abusing a 7-year-old child. I've admitted to parenting her. Something that woman, she pointed at Callie, has never had to do. She wants to swoop in and be the fun aunt, but she has no idea what it takes to actually raise a child. What about the forged will? The identity theft? I protected my daughter's inheritance from someone who would have squandered it. I secured her financial future. And yes, I corrected my husband's will because his original plan was ridiculous. You committed fraud. I protected my family. Judge Hernandez had heard enough. Mr. Steinberg, does your client have anything else to say? Steinberg whispered urgently to Vanessa, but she shook her head and remained standing. Your Honor, I am Nola's mother. That gives me rights that supersede anyone else's feelings or opinions. I demand that my daughter be returned to me immediately. Ms. Thorne, you are in no position to demand anything. Judge Hernandez called a recess to review the evidence and prepare her ruling. Callie spent the hour in the courthouse cafeteria with Lisa, barely able to touch her coffee. How do you think it went? Callie asked. Better than I hoped. Vanessa's testimony was essentially a confession to child abuse. Her lawyer should have kept her off the stand. But she's still Nola's biological mother. Doesn't that count for something? Not when there's evidence of systematic abuse and fraud. And Nola's own testimony was devastating. Children that age don't lie about physical abuse. They don't have the sophistication to invent those details. When court reconvened, Judge Hernandez looked grim. This case involves some of the most egregious behavior I've seen in 20 years on the family court bench. The evidence presented today shows a clear pattern of child abuse, financial fraud, and document forgery. She turned to Vanessa. Ms. Thorne, your recorded admissions to forging your deceased husbands will constitute felony fraud. Your use of your daughter's personal information to obtain credit constitutes identity theft, a federal crime. And your own testimony, combined with medical evidence and the child's statements, establishes systematic physical abuse of a minor. Vanessa's face had gone white. However, the most damning evidence against you came from your own mouth. When asked about your daughter's injuries, you didn't deny causing them. You justified them. That tells me everything I need to know about your fitness as a parent. Judge Hernandez picked up her gavel. Therefore, I hereby grant immediate emergency custody of Nola David Branson and her aunt, Callie Marie Branson, based on the legitimate will filed by the child's father. Ms. Thorne, you are ordered to surrender the child immediately. You can't do this. Vanessa shrieked, jumping to her feet. She's my daughter. My daughter. Bailiff, please escort Ms. Thorne from my courtroom. Ms. Kim, please prepare the necessary custody transfer documents. But Vanessa wasn't finished. As the bailiff approached her, she spun toward Callie with pure hatred in her eyes. You think you've won? You don't know the first thing about raising children. She'll be back with me within a month, begging to come home. Ma'am, you need to leave now, the bailiff said firmly. She's broken. She's damaged goods because of what her father did to her. You'll see. You'll see what she's really like when the cameras aren't rolling. The bailiff had to physically remove Vanessa from the courtroom as she continued screaming threats and accusations. In the sudden silence that followed, Judge Hernandez addressed Callie directly. Ms. Branson, I'm granting you emergency custody, but this will need to be formalized through a full custody hearing in 30 days. In the meantime, I'm recommending that Nola receive immediate counseling and medical attention. Yes, Your Honor. I'm also issuing a restraining order against Ms. Thorne and her brother, Mason Thorne. They're not to contact you or the child in any way. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor. Finally, I'm referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for criminal prosecution. The evidence of fraud and child abuse warrants felony charges. Outside the courthouse, Callie found Nola waiting with the court advocate. The girl looked lost and frightened, clutching a small backpack that apparently contained all her possessions. "Hi, sweetheart," Callie said gently, kneeling down to Nola's level. "Are you ready to come home with me?" Nola nodded but didn't speak. "It's going to be different now. You're safe. No one is going to hurt you anymore. Promise." "I promise." As they walked toward Callie's car, Nola slipped her small hand into Callie's. It was the first time the girl had voluntarily touched another person in months. Behind them, the courthouse doors opened and Mason Thorne emerged, his face twisted with rage. He spotted them across the parking lot and started walking in their direction with purpose. "Get in the car," Callie told Nola, unlocking the doors quickly. Mason was closing the distance, his hands clenched into fists. "This isn't over," he called out. "You think a piece of paper changes anything? Family is family. Stay away from us," Callie called back, positioning herself between Mason and the car. "That kid belongs with her blood relatives. You're nobody, just some dried-up old maid who couldn't get a man of her own." A courthouse security guard had noticed the confrontation and was approaching. Mason saw him coming and backed off, but not before getting in one last threat. "Watch your back, lady. Crestwood's a small town. Accidents happen." As Mason drove away in his auto shop van, Callie realized that winning custody was just the beginning. Vanessa and Mason weren't going to accept defeat quietly, and they knew where she lived. 5 months later, Callie sat in the public gallery of the same courthouse, watching Vanessa Thorne being led to the defendant's table in an orange jumpsuit and shackles. The woman who had once commanded every room she entered now looked haggard and defeated. The intervening months had been hard for everyone. Nola was in therapy twice a week and had made significant progress, but she still woke up screaming some nights and flinched when anyone raised their voice. Callie had learned patience she never knew she possessed. Vanessa had been arrested 3 weeks after the custody hearing, when the FBI's investigation into the identity theft had uncovered even more fraud. She'd been using not only Nola's information but also David's, continuing to use his credit cards and file false tax returns in his name months after his death. Mason had been arrested as an accomplice, charged with helping forge the will and launder money through his auto shop. He'd agreed to testify against his sister in exchange for a lighter sentence. The courtroom was packed. Word had spread through Crestwood about the case, and many people who'd been fooled by Vanessa's act wanted to see justice served. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Martinez," the bailiff announced. Judge Elena Martinez was known for harsh sentences in child abuse cases. She'd reviewed all the evidence from the custody hearing plus additional material uncovered during the criminal investigation. "Ms. Thorne, you've been found guilty by a jury of your peers on multiple felony counts: aggravated child abuse, identity theft, wire fraud, tax fraud, and conspiracy to commit document fraud. Before I impose sentence, do you have anything to say?" Vanessa stood with her public defender. Her expensive lawyer had dropped her when she couldn't pay his bills anymore. "Your Honor, I never meant to hurt anyone. I was just trying to protect my daughter and secure her future. I made mistakes, but everything I did was motivated by love." "Ms. Thorne, during your trial, we heard testimony from medical experts, law enforcement officers, and your own daughter about the systematic abuse you inflicted. We heard recorded evidence of you admitting to fraud and expressing no remorse for your actions. The word love should never come out of your mouth in reference to that child." Judge Martinez consulted her notes. The pre-sentence investigation reveals a pattern of manipulation and abuse that extends back years. Your ex-employers reported suspicious financial activity. Former neighbors described hearing children crying at all hours. Your own brother testified that you once broke a child's arm and forced him to lie about how it happened. Callie glanced at Nola, who was sitting beside her. The girl was drawing in a sketchbook, her latest coping mechanism. The pictures were still dark sometimes, but they were getting brighter. Therefore, Judge Martinez continued, I sentence you to 20 years in state prison without possibility of parole. 5 years for aggravated child abuse, 10 years for identity theft and financial fraud, and 5 years for conspiracy, to be served consecutively. Vanessa's knees buckled. Her public defender had to hold her up. Additionally, you are ordered to pay full restitution for all fraudulent charges and stolen funds, including interest and penalties. You are permanently barred from any contact with the victim, and upon your release, you will be subject to lifetime registration as a child abuser. 20 years. Vanessa gasped. But I'm her mother. You forfeited that title when you chose to abuse and exploit an innocent child. Bailiff, remove the defendant. As Vanessa was led away in chains, she looked back at Callie with pure hatred. But for the first time, Callie felt no fear. Vanessa had no power anymore. She was just a broken woman in an orange jumpsuit who would spend the next 2 decades in a concrete cell. Outside the courthouse, reporters were waiting. The case had attracted regional attention as an example of how sophisticated abusers could manipulate the system. Ms. Branson, how do you feel about the sentence? A reporter called out. Justice was served, Callie said simply. That's all that matters. What about Nola? How is she adjusting? Callie looked down at the girl beside her, who was still clutching her sketchbook. She's healing. She's strong. She's going to be okay. Any message for other families dealing with abuse? Don't give up. Keep fighting. The truth always comes out eventually. As they walked to their car, Nola tugged on Callie's sleeve. Is it really over now? It's really over, sweetheart. She can't hurt you anymore. Good. Nola opened her sketchbook to a new drawing she'd been working on during the sentencing. It showed 2 figures, a woman and a girl, standing in front of a house with a white picket fence. Above them, the sun was shining through white clouds. What's this one called? Callie asked. Home, Nola said simply. That evening, local news covered the sentencing extensively. Vanessa's mugshot appeared on every channel, along with details about her crimes. The woman who had once charmed everyone she met was now publicly revealed as a child abuser and fraud. Her former friends and acquaintances lined up to give interviews about how shocked they were, how they'd never suspected anything. But Florence Huxley, when approached by reporters, had a different perspective. I knew from day one that woman was trouble, she told the camera. Some people can smell evil. That woman wore charm like perfume, but underneath it was all rot. 6 months later, Callie received a letter forwarded through the court system. Vanessa had written from prison, asking for photos of Nola and promising she'd changed, that she'd found God and wanted to be part of her daughter's life again. Callie threw the letter in the trash without finishing it. A year after the sentencing, Nola's therapist declared her ready to reduce sessions to once a month. The nightmares had stopped. She gained weight and grown 3 inches. She laughed regularly and had made friends at her new school. But most importantly, she felt safe. She wore short sleeves now, letting her scars show without shame. They were proof of what she'd survived, and she was proud of her strength. On the 2nd anniversary of the custody ruling, Nola presented Callie with a painting she'd been working on in art therapy. It showed a woman and girl walking across a bridge from darkness into sunlight. The girl in the painting was smiling. At the bottom, in careful 7-year-old handwriting, she'd written one word, safe. Callie hung it in the living room where she could see it every day. It was a reminder that sometimes the worst experiences lead to the best outcomes, and that family isn't always about blood. Sometimes it's about who shows up when you need them most. Vanessa Thorne would spend the next 18 years in a concrete cell, her beauty fading and her charm useless. She'd lost everything that mattered to her: her freedom, her reputation, her daughter, and her future. Meanwhile, in a small house across town, a little girl was learning what love actually felt like. She was discovering that adults could be trusted, that home could be safe, and that her voice mattered. The scales of justice had finally balanced. 3 years after Vanessa's sentencing, Callie received a call from the Oregon Department of Corrections. Vanessa had been found dead in her cell, apparent suicide. She'd left no note. Callie hung up the phone and looked across the kitchen table at 10-year-old Nola, who was working on homework while humming softly to herself. The girl had grown tall and strong, her dark hair shining with health, her arms decorated with friendship bracelets instead of bruises. "Who was that?" Nola asked without looking up from her math problems. "Nobody important," Callie said, and meant it. That night, after Nola was asleep, Callie sat on her front porch and thought about closure. Some people might say she should feel sorry for Vanessa or guilty about her role in the woman's downfall. But all Callie felt was relief that the threat was finally, permanently gone. The next morning was Saturday, and Nola came down to breakfast with a canvas tucked under her arm. "I finished it," she announced, setting the painting on the kitchen counter. It was the most beautiful thing Callie had ever seen. The painting showed a phoenix rising from ashes, its wings spread wide against a brilliant blue sky. But this wasn't a traditional phoenix. It had the face of a little girl with dark hair and knowing eyes that the bottom. In careful script, Nola had written, "From the ashes we rise." "What did you learn about phoenixes?" Callie asked. "Mrs. Thompson told us about them in art class. She said sometimes the most beautiful things come from the worst situations." Nola looked at her painting critically. "Do you think it's true?" Callie put her arm around the girl who had survived hell and emerged stronger than anyone could have imagined. "I think you're living proof of it, sweetheart." Nola smiled and leaned into the embrace. "Can we hang it next to the bridge painting?" "We can hang it anywhere you want." Later that day, they visited Florence, who was now 84 and still keeping meticulous notes about everything that happened in the neighborhood. She admired Nola's painting while the girl played with Florence's new kitten. "That child is going to do great things," Florence said quietly to Callie. "Mark my words." "She already has," Callie replied, watching Nola giggle as the kitten pounced on a piece of string. "She survived. That's the greatest thing of all." As the sun set over Crestwood, Callie sat on her front porch with a cup of tea, watching Nola practice skateboarding tricks in the driveway. The girl was fearless now, willing to fall and get back up, willing to trust that someone would be there to bandage her scraped knees and cheer her successes. Across the street, the house where Vanessa had lived stood empty. The bank had foreclosed on it months ago, and no one had shown interest in buying it. The neighborhood kids said it was haunted, but Callie knew better. Ghosts were just memories, and some memories deserved to be forgotten. What mattered was the future. And as she watched Nola land a perfect kick turn and pump her fist in triumph, Callie knew that future was going to be extraordinary. The little girl who had once drawn pictures of crying children trapped in boxes now created art full of light and hope and possibility. She learned that love didn't have to hurt, that adults could be trusted, and that her voice had power. Most importantly, she'd learned that she was safe, and in a small house in Crestwood, Oregon, that was enough to build a whole new life on.